Before you decide if someone is attractive, your brain has already decided for you in less than a second. Research in evolutionary psychology and neuroscience shows that humans form impressions of faces and bodies in as little as a few hundred milliseconds. That means before you consciously think, your brain is already predicting who feels attractive, who feels trustworthy, who feels worth paying attention to. And here's the uncomfortable part. These decisions are not always accurate. They are fast guesses based on patterns your brain learned thousands of years ago. But the world has changed and your brain hasn't. So in this video we are going to break something down very clearly. Not opinions, not trends, but what research actually suggests about attraction. What your brain is actually looking for, what it gets right, and where it completely misleads you. Because once you understand this, you won't see attraction the same way again. Your brain is not designed to understand people deeply at first glance. It is designed to predict quickly. From an evolutionary perspective, this made sense. Early humans didn't have time to analyze every stranger. They needed fast decisions, safe or dangerous, healthy or unhealthy, useful or not useful. So your brain developed shortcuts. These shortcuts are known as heuristics. They are efficient, but they are not perfect. And attraction is heavily influenced by these shortcuts. So what exactly is your brain using to make these decisions? Across many studies, one pattern appears again and again. The brain is highly sensitive to visible health signals. Skin clarity, energy, facial coloration, even subtle cues like brightness in the eyes. These signals matter because in early human environment, health was uncertain. There were no medical tests, so the brain relied on what it could see. For example, research shows that even slight improvements in skin quality can significantly increase perceived attractiveness. Not because skin equals beauty, but because the brain interprets it as a reduced risk. And attraction is strongly linked to risk perception. But health is only the first layer. The brain is also reading structure. When you look at a body, your brain is not measuring weight. It is detecting proportions, balance, relationship between parts. In female bodies, one of the most studied patterns is the waist to hip ratio. Research across different populations have found that a ratio where the waist is narrower than the hip is often rated as attractive. From an evolutionary perspective, this pattern has been associated with hormonal health and reproductive potential. But again, this is not a strict rule. It is a probability signal. Your brain is making a guess, not a conclusion. Now, when we look at a male body, a different pattern appears. The shoulder to waist ratio becomes important. Broader shoulders combined with a narrower waist often signal upper body strength. Study shows that this proportion is frequently rated as attractive. But something interesting appears here. Extreme muscularity is not always preferred. In fact, moderate muscularity is often rated higher than very high levels. This suggests that the brain is not simply selecting for strength, it is selecting for a balance between strength and stability. But even body structure doesn't fully explain attraction because something changes everything the moment a person moves. Research shows that movement can significantly change how attractive persons appear. The way a person walks, their posture, their coordination. These signals reveal something deeper than a structure. They reveal internal state, confidence, energy, control. For example, studies using motion analysis shows that people can judge attractiveness based only on their walking patterns. Even without seeing facial details, this tells you something powerful. The brain is not just looking at the body, it is interpreting behavior. And this leads to one of the most important factors in attraction. Confidence is not just a personality trait, it is something the brain reads physically through posture, stillness, eye contact, controlled movement. Research shows that confident individuals are often rated as more attractive, even when physical features are similar. Why? Because confidence signals predictability, and the brain prefers predictable person. They feel safer, more understandable, more stable. But now we need to challenge something most people believe. Many people believe attraction is about perfection. Perfect body, perfect face, perfect proportions. But research does not strongly support this. In fact, slight imperfections increase reliability. Another common belief is that there is one ideal body type, but cross-cultural study shows variation. Preferences changes depending on environment, resources and social norms. This shows that attraction is flexible, not fixed. And this flexibility becomes even more clearer over time. Someone who doesn't seem attractive at first can become attractive later. This happens because the brain updates its model. As you interact with someone, new information becomes more important than appearance. Personality, behavior, emotional connection. These begin to reshape attraction. Attraction is not a single decision, it is a process. It begins with fast, imperfect signals, but it evolves through experience. Your brain is constantly predicting, constantly updating, constantly adjusting, and once you understand this, you start seeing attraction differently, not as something mysterious, but as something structured, something shaped by both biology and experience. So the next time your brain makes a quick judgment, you might pause and ask yourself, is it real or just a prediction? Because the truth is, the brain decides quickly, but understanding always takes time. At this point, we can start putting everything together in a more precise way. When the human brain evaluates physical attraction, it is not making a single decision. It is combining multiple signals. Research in evolutionary psychology and social cognition shows that attraction is influenced by a mix of biological cues and learned patterns. Some of these cues are related to what research calls honest signals. These are traits that may reflect underlying conditions such as health, hormonal balance, or developmental stability. For example, features like skin clarity, facial balance, and certain body proportions have been studied because they can correlate to some degree with health-related variables. But it is important to understand this carefully. These signals are not exact measurements, they are probabilistic. The brain is not identifying truth, it is estimating likelihood. And this is a key principle in how perception works. The brain operates under uncertainty. So instead of waiting for complete information, it makes fast prediction based on available cues. This process is efficient, but it also introduces bias. One well-known example is the halo effect. When a person appears physically attractive, observers are more likely to assume that they also possess positive traits, such as intelligence, competence, and trust. This effect has been demonstrated in multiple experimental settings, including hiring simulations and social evaluations. However, these assumptions are not necessarily accurate. They are extensions of an initial visual impression. Another important concept is processing efficiency. The brain tends to prefer stimuli that are easier to interpret. This is often described as cognitive fluency. When someone is easier for the brain to process, it often feels more familiar and more pleasant. This is one reason why balanced proportions and clear visual patterns can be perceived as attractive. But attraction is not only about static features. Dynamic cues also play a role. Studies using motion-based analysis has shown that people can make judgment about attractiveness based on their movements. Posture, walking style, and coordination can influence perception because they provide information about energy and motor control. These are interpreted by the brain as indicators of internal state. In addition to biological and perceptual factors, attraction is also shaped by psychological processes. One of the most consistent findings is the mere exposure effect. People tend to develop a preference for a stimuli they have seen repeatedly. This means that familiarity can increase attractiveness over time. This helps explain why initial impressions are not fixed. As exposure increases, perception can change. There is also strong evidence that non-physical traits influence attraction significantly over time. Behavioral consistency, emotional stability, and social interaction patterns begin to override purely visual cues. Longitudinal studies suggest that relationship satisfaction is more strongly linked to personality and communication than to initial physical attractiveness. So, when we ask what determines attraction, the scientific answer is not a single factor, it is a system. And importantly, this system is adaptive. It updates as new information becomes available, which means first impressions are influential but not final. From a scientific perspective, attraction is the best understood as a multi-stage process. The first stage is rapid and automatic. It relies heavily on visual cues and learned patterns. The second stage is slower. It incorporates behavioral information and interaction. And the third stage is long-term context, is shaped primarily by psychological compatibility. Understanding this layered process helps explaining why attraction can feel immediate yet still change over time. It also explains why different people can have different preferences. Because while some components of attraction are widely shared, others are shaped by individual experience and environment. So, the next time you experience a strong first impression, it may be useful to interpret it in a slightly different way. Not as a final judgment, but as an initial output of a predictive system. A system that is fast, efficient, and shaped by both biology and experience. And like any predictive system, it improves with more data, which means real understanding of another person always develops over time. And that is where perception becomes more accurate. Not in the first second, but in the moments that follow.